Okay, my name is Ray Keith, nicknamed Buddy. I was born in Bardstown, Kentucky, to a family of Paul and Rebecca Keith. She was from a little town called New Hope, Kentucky, and he was from Bardstown, Kentucky. And in 13 years, they had 10 children. And my father died at 33, or there's no telling how many brothers and sisters I would have had. My grandfather was the miller in Bardstown, Kentucky. When farmers brought their grain in so the wheat would be split into bran and flour and sold in grocery stores. They didn't have supermarkets in those days, but they bag it all up in the grocery stores. I was 4 years old when I remember the first thing about him, but he used to sit by they had our fireplace in my grandfather's house had a big pot-bellied stove in front of it in the winter time because it was cold, but in the warmer weathers the fireplace would burn. But he'd hold me in his lap and so forth, and I was kind of a favorite kid. I don't know. My favorite times that I can ever remember is two things. Going to the barber shop with my dad. I was the number 5 child, and I think maybe I was a little bit his favorite. I don't know why. Maybe I was the first blue-eyed son to an Irish family. I don't know. But he would go get a shave and a haircut, and I would sit and watch him do it. Shaves were indeed 25 cents at that time, and haircuts, I believe, were 15 cents, but they might have been 25 cents both ways. I also really loved to go riding in his truck. He was he hauled stuff back and forth. He had 2 flatbed trucks, and that was how he made his living. And he was just really fun. He was always laughing. My dad died in 1941, before Pearl Harbor. And there were 10 of us. And my mother bought a grocery store and ran a grocery store for a couple of years, and it was awful. And she had a rooming house, and she rented some of the rooms, and we slept in the others because there were 10 of us, and that was on the main street in Bardstown. About 2 years of that, it was wearing on my mother's bed that my oldest sister, Jeanne, who was a saint, asked our grandmother to take us into her home, and with Becky, with my mother, whose nickname was Becky, and so we all moved into my grandmother's house, and for I don't know, two years, I guess, and then my mother moved to Louisville. She just didn't like it living with my grandmother, and my grandmother never did like her. So she moved away, and my grandmother raised us all the way till we either flew the coop or graduated from something and so forth. My mother, I don't remember much about her except she was mother, and she loved us all dearly. I remember one Christmas when I didn't like I was very young. I didn't like very much what I got, so I went into the kitchen and got behind the stove and was whimpering. And she got me out and said, whatever you want, we're going to see that Santa brings it to you, or something like that. So enough about that. I went to school in Bardstown, and while I didn't like most of them when I was going to school because they were strict, I have appreciated the learning that I got from those ladies. They were very dedicated to it. I don't remember much about what goes on now, but most of them I still remember their names. I think Sister Ann Benedict was my first grade teacher, so you love them most because they're usually the youngest and the sweetest and so forth. They were all pretty good. I was more trouble for them than they were for me, so I was kind of rowdy when I was a kid.
Imagine that.
I went to boarding school in Cullman, Alabama, where my older brothers had all been, St. Bernard's, and my oldest brother Charlie went there, and then Paul went there, and later went into the seminary, and later went into the Trappist monastery at Bardstown, south of Bardstown. Bob went there, and he left. He quit school after the sophomore year and joined the Air Force. But he schooled himself while he was in the Air Force and got 2 master's degrees and graduated a light colonel, which is almost never when you don't have that kind of an education like he did. So I went to St. Bernard's my freshman year of high school, and I came back home, and for some reason the sign-ups got mixed up, and my name didn't get in, and they didn't make a seat for me in the school. So I went to St. Joseph's, a brother's school in Bardstown, about 5 blocks from where we live. And the moment that needs to be heard by my children and grandchildren is Brother Valens was a beast, and he had a bad problem of hitting the students. So he slugged me one day, and I slugged him back, knocked him down. And I knew I was dead, but this was back in the olden days, and there were glass windows, and the windows were all open. So I went out the window and went home to grandmother's, and she said, "Brother Vincent, the principal, wants you in his office." And I said, that'll never happen. And I ended up leaving grandmother. My Uncle Buzz, there's not a lot to say about him except that he got me into Bardstown High School, the public school, and I got an apartment at Mrs. Pardew's rooming house for $4 a week or less, very cheap. And I went to work and worked 2 jobs. I worked in the drugstore in the daytime. I worked as a desk clerk in the hotels. This is when I was pretty young. I worked as a desk clerk in a hotel in Bardstown. I lost that job because I wasn't 16, and somebody complained about me not being of age, so I lost that job. So I ended up working at a snack shop owned by the sister of my history teacher at school, and that connection helped me immeasurably getting through high school and getting away with some of my tricks that I pulled. So I worked at the Snappy Snack in Bardstown for $15 a week, and room and board at the owners' homes, signed my own report cards. And when I graduated from high school, my grandmother came and reminded me that she had loaned me $15 when I was in the 8th grade, and I never did pay her back, so I paid her back.
Okay, my name is Jeanne Woody. Actually, Jeanne Gordon Woody Keith. I do not have near as colorful a background as Buddy does.
You're nobody else.
I grew up in Pikeville, Kentucky, which is in the mountains, almost on the West Virginia line, up there where the Hatfields and the Coys are. And I had a wonderful childhood. I was an only child, so you can imagine adjusting to marrying somebody who was one of 10. It took me a while to get everybody's names straight and the spouses and the children and all that, so it was an adjustment. My father got hit by a car when I was 4, so that's a very vivid memory for me because I saw it. And so he died, and my mother did remarry later. But I had a very protected childhood. My grandfather was the doctor in this little town who was a very important person in a small town. And he was also chairman of the school board. So I got away with more than I probably should have because of him. But you know, they took very good care of me, and I had a wonderful growing up there. And I would recommend a small town to grow up in. I think it's true, it takes a village. Mother would know where I'd been and who with and what I'd done before I ever got home from school. So, but that was a good thing. We lived there until I was 15, and the coal mines were what they called down, which meant they weren't operating. My father owned, or my stepfather, owned a restaurant, and when the miners didn't have any money to spend, it affected every business in town. So we ended up, he took a job in Louisville, and we ended up moving to Louisville just before, the summer before my junior year in high school. So I actually graduated from school in Louisville. Was very homesick the first year. The second year, I went to a Catholic girls' school, and that was a very good experience. I learned a lot about the Catholic religion. I grew up Methodist and active in the church, sang in the choir, all that sort of thing. So that was good. So I ended up loving Louisville. That's where I met Buddy there. And I never did go to an actual college. I went to business college after high school and learned shorthand and typing and all those things and became a secretary. I worked, my first job was at Standard Oil, and I hated it. I didn't want to go to bed at night because I knew when I got up the next morning I'd have to go there. So when I could, I changed jobs, and I got a job at WHAS-TV, which was the CBS affiliate. And I loved that. That was just great. So after several boyfriends, I met him. And that's been, it'll be 63, we will have been married 63 years in June. So, and I was just telling someone that the funny thing about that is it was neither one of us first marriage. So if we had married each other first time around, it really would be a long time.
I can do that. I lived in a rooming house, as I said, and there was another fellow living in there who was from Pikeville, Kentucky, and was in kindergarten with one Jeanne Woody Keith, later Keith. So they were going out together, but only as friends. They went to school.
We were more like brother and sister.
Yeah, and I had, to say that I was dating more than one girl is being kind. I had probably, I don't know, 4 or 6 girls that I dated from time to time. And as Jeanne would point out, they all thought they were the one, and she can tell you some more about that maybe if you want.
I should tell you about the first time I ever saw him.
I met them, and I asked Dick. We were going dancing, and I asked Dick if he minded if I asked Jeanne for a date, and he said, "No, we're just buddies and so forth." So I asked her for a date, and arranged to meet her on Sunday noon to take her and her daughter for a ride around the town, and just make sure that she knew I wasn't all the wolf that I was being talked about and so forth. And later in the evening, Dick came to me and said, "I've thought about it, but I'd really rather you didn't ask Jeanne for a date," but it was too late. So Dick stayed, incidentally, stayed a friend. Hell, he practically lived with us when I don't know where he is now, but we kept him for a long time. He'd come and get a job where I'd transfer in my restaurant jobs, and Dick would show up and so forth.
Well, the first time I ever saw him, I was not impressed. we had tickets to the Stephen Foster story in Bardstown. And
I've forgotten about that.
we were supposed to meet Buddy and his date there, and Buddy had the tickets. So we waited and we waited. The show started. We're outside waiting. We hear the music. And finally, he comes swaggering down. And a swaggering is a good way to describe it. Happy and everything. And I am so mad by this time. We have missed the beginning of the show. So he and his girlfriend
Who was a foxy chick.
She was a redhead, I think. But anyway, I was not impressed. I didn't like the attitude, and he would drive with a drink in the car, and I was not a drinker. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So I wasn't impressed at all with him. But we kept double dating with them because he and Dick were friends. And of course, then I saw all the different girl each night that he would bring candy and flowers and all this. That's why they each thought they were the only one. And they would corner me in the ladies' room and say, "I think he likes me, don't you?" And of course, I'd been with him the night before, and he was with a different girl who said the same thing. So he was just too fast for me. He wasn't my kind of guy. But he was a fabulous dancer. So I always enjoyed doubling with him when I could dance with him. So when he asked me out, I said, "I will go on one condition, that you take me dancing." So that was the beginning. And I found out he wasn't all bad. So.
She's just a good person. I can say that again, but I really wasn't messing around with anybody like Jeanne. She was the first for me, just like I was for her. Our first date was I picked her up at noon, and we took a ride, and I was going to pick her and her little girl up. So when I got there and met Jeanne's mother, she said she'd keep the baby at home and we could go on by ourselves. So we went riding around, and we rode past the airport when the airplanes were flying around, and she said, "I've always wanted to ride in one of those airplanes." I turned left, and we went for an airplane ride. When we got out, she said, "I think I'd like to take flying lessons." Into the door, met the man put in charge, signed up for flying. I was a pretty good bartender and made pretty darn good, very good tips and so forth. And I had a '57 Chevrolet convertible, which I wish I could sell now. And so money was not a problem on a date. And so we took a ride. And then we signed up and then we went riding around. I was selling cemetery lots for a living at that time in a brand new cemetery, so I showed her the cemetery, so whatever. And then we rode up the highway and just looked around, and we stayed gone so long that her mother had begun to worry about her. So I don't remember, I think it was around 5 o'clock in the evening, we came back home, and Mother got settled down, so we went back out and partied around, and finally, I don't know if it's ever. It used to be that the thing to do was to go to these night places and sit on the floor and listen to music and so forth. So we ended up until 1 o'clock in the morning sitting on the floor somewhere sitting to music. So that was, I'm talking too much, so.
The men that I had been going out with, their idea of a really good time was to go sit in a bar. Well, I didn't drink. And unless they were extremely interesting, that's pretty boring to sit in a bar for 2 or 3 hours. And that just wasn't my idea of fun. The things that he suggested we do were great. I mean, let's go up in an airplane. Let's take a flying lesson. We did tour a cemetery on that first date. And there was always the dancing. There was always somewhere we could go.
We owned lots in that cemetery.
And dance. So he was a really welcome change from the guys I'd been going out with. He was lots of fun, and it was just a whole different scenario. I was divorced, and being divorced, in that day and time, men looked at you a lot differently then. So it was very refreshing to meet him. So that's how he was different, and that's what appealed to me. Plus, he didn't make any moves toward me like the guys that I'd been dating because I was divorced. He took his time. It was a long time before he even kissed me goodnight. He waited until I really wanted him to, which was nice, instead of forcing himself on me like most of the other guys. So he was just very different, and that got me. So. He proposed on Christmas Eve.
I did. I was going.
And we had only been dating since the beginning of October. So that was really pretty quick. But I think we had both been married. We were both a little older than the first time we got married. And kids did immediately become a part of the picture.
I had 2 children and she had 1.
He had 2 girls and I had 1 girl.
When we decided to get serious, we didn't have any money. I was making good money, but I was spending it all and so forth. So we got a jar and put it in her house, and for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, I took all of my tips, and put them in that jar. And so we didn't do much.
Well, we didn't get married till the following June.
I know.
That was 6 months.
So that's the reason our only dates then was going to this place where you could put a quarter in and play 3 records for a quarter and dance and drink a 7-Up and so forth. That was our dates and so forth. And we were both good with that we were saving money. So this house became on the market for sale. This builder had taken this house as a trade on one he had built and sold to the fella, and he had it for sale, and he had it listed for $10,500. And David already knows his mother can bargain like a whatever. Anyway, she went over and looked at the house and told him, said, the house is not worth $10,500, but I will consider paying you, but you got to hear the rules. She told her the rules. She said, first of all, we don't have any money, so we can't make a down payment on the house, but if you'll finance the house, we'll pay 6 months rent as we get it, and we're not going to get married for 6 months anyway, and so that's how we made the down payment on the house. Yeah. $57.35, if I remember correctly, and so forth. And he was so taken with this brat that he did it. So we bought the house and paid for it that way. So I don't remember how much money we got in that jar, but we did not do anything but save money.
I'll tell you what we did. Both of our mothers played bridge.
Yeah.
So we played bridge with his mother and my mother, and they taught us. His mother was a whiz at bridge, and they taught us to play bridge, and that didn't cost any money. We would have an evening's entertainment and play cards, and that even helped after we got married, because at that time young people played cards and things, so we could take the babies to somebody's house and put them to sleep on the bed and play cards, and it didn't cost anything. So that was a great thing. And it's paid off for us. We've been the bridge champions here at Conquistador for several years in a row in duplicate bridge. So it's something we have enjoyed our whole married life together, well, before we married. So, but we did it to save money when we first learned. So I think that's an interesting thing, that we ended up being, champion bridge players and from our mothers, so.
I'm a little better than you are, but you're pretty good.
Okay, we got married in the Methodist church that I was attending at the time. I will tell you, Buddy was raised Catholic, and by this time was out of the Catholic Church because he had been divorced twice. But his mother was still a strong Catholic, and she would not come to our wedding because at that time they were not allowed to attend other church functions other than the Catholic Church. We had a reception at home at my mother's house, and she did come to that, but it hurt my feelings terribly that she didn't come to the wedding. I remember that because, you know, being a Protestant, I couldn't understand why she couldn't come and then go to confession and confess it and, you know, still be able to come to the wedding. But it was, of course, very small, being a second wedding. But it was a very nice service and, you know, a nice little reception, but not a big wedding. So, you want to add?
Well, I need to go back again in the past. When we started dating, I knew it was serious, and I had never done anything but be a bartender. Actually, I was a bartender before I was 18 years old because it was on an Army base at Fort Knox, and they didn't have to follow the rules and so forth. But when I met Jeanne, I thought I'm going to have to be thinking about this. So I went in and talked to my boss about, can I become a manager trainee and work in there? So that Sunday morning, I was no longer a bartender. I was a dishwasher in the dishwashing area of the kitchen and so forth, and went on like that. I worked 7 days and 7 nights a week for, we got married in June. It must have been, I've forgotten what it was, but I guess it was our wedding day. I hadn't had a day off. This guy, I was later his boss's boss, so he didn't last long, and I did. And so I went in, and I was then working on the line at noon, and the airport manager came in and finally went back there, and we were supposed to get married at 2 o'clock, and I was still working the line in my uniform and so forth. So he goes into the manager and says, "Are you going to give him a chance to take a shower or what?" And so that's how I made it. I just barely made it to the wedding. So we got married at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Becky did come, didn't she?
Well, she came to the reception.
Yeah.
So. But they did let him off a day, so we...
Yeah, I had to be back at work Monday.
So we drove to Cincinnati after the reception and so forth, and spent Saturday night there and Sunday. But then we had to come back. So, but that was fun. We went to, for dinner, at that time there was this great night club, I guess you would call that. Dinner and dancing and all that. And so we had dinner there, and Tony Bennett was the entertainment. It was a very high-class nightclub, and so we got to see and hear Tony Bennett in person, which was just great. And that's where that picture was made that I think David has a copy of, and Linda has a copy of. The Beverly Hills was the name of it, and it has since burned to the ground. But it was a great place. So we got to do something really special on our wedding night.
Two
things. That was nice. Considering we had such a short time, that was a very special thing to get to see and hear Tony Bennett, because he was at the height of his fame at that time. So that was good. When I was little, I mentioned my dad got killed when I was 4. And he was one of 9 from a family in Hollins, Virginia. And they were a wonderful family, and my mother wanted me to know that side of the family. So she would let me go in the summers. She would put me on the train. It was called the Hummingbird. And I would ride by myself to Roanoke. At that time, you could do that with your children, and the conductor looked after me and so forth. So she would let me go and spend a couple of months in the summer with my relatives in Virginia. And that was a wonderful thing. I never would have gotten to know them if she hadn't let me do that. So I grew up very close to all my aunts and uncles and cousins in Virginia. Being an only child, that was another blessing for me. So the aunts and uncles would get together at Mountain Lake, Virginia, and they were the ones that were responsible for us being invited to participate. All the cousins and their families and everybody would go, and that's how we started going. It was kind of their family reunion, but ours too, because we were part of that family. So it became an every year tradition for us to go, and we could spend time with them, and we could also all spend time together. So now you can pick up there where we all rented a cabin. You know, each family had their own cabin.
One thing Will, Patty's son, was he's a very intelligent guy. His IQ is through the roof. So, and he's a little better now. He knows everything. So I went to the desk one day, and he had gone into the bar and bought drinks for everybody and signed my name and put it in there. I went in and got him by the ear. You know, he was a teenager, and took him to the desk. It's kind of like my son has something to say to you, and made him pay the bill. So if Will ever gets a hold of this, he'll remember it well.
Well, one of my favorites was we have several talented musicians in the family. A lot of Linda's boys. They were wonderful on singing and playing the guitar. David could sing and play the guitar. So at night after dinner, lots of times we would gather in one cabin, and you know, the kids would sing. And in fact, that's how our Reno group got so fond, I think, of country music, because they would be there too. And so growing up, they heard some of the country music that the boys were playing and singing and all of that. So I loved that. Bud is very musical, and so the whole families enjoyed the musical part. So that was probably my favorite thing about Mountain Lake. The favorite thing was having everybody all together.
The favorite thing is all of that family getting together, yes, and not one upset. No upsets, and so forth. I just...
Yeah, that's the best, but that's just a memory that I think we all enjoyed.
I can remember that I was a terrible tennis player then, and I still am. So that's what I remember.
Well, he enjoyed it. And
I just enjoyed being with the ones that were playing tennis with me and so forth.
Vogel was one of them.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
I had a good time. The people that served your meals were great people. Just real fun. We may end up doing that again now as a result of this.
Well, it's changed a lot now, so.
Well, we can go and see the difference. The thing I remember about Jeanne is that she took those two children in, and Mindy was in the middle, and it was ours and yours and mine and so forth. I never, ever heard your mother raise her voice to any of you. Not the first time have I seen your mother raise her voice. She doesn't curse and so forth. I managed to do that. Well, I'm not so bad now. I'm kind of worn out, but I married a hell of a lady. And another thing about her, these kids, if they don't already know what a superstar their mother is, she is. We moved 16 times because I got offered better jobs. The word got out on me. I got called from search firms that he could straighten it out and so forth.
And Dobbs House moved us a lot.
Dobbs House, huh?
Dobbs House moved us a lot.
Yeah.
You were 19
I was a bartender,
years
and I ended up managing a supervisor for 6 years, and then I managed the Atlanta airport catering and snack bars and bars. The profits the last year that I was there running the Atlanta airport was $86 million. I was a troubleshooter, so when they hire you, the money's good and they want you there and so forth. So she's closed. If she hadn't closed them all, I can't remember doing one. She bought and sold and made the move and had the house ready for me when I could get home and so forth. There is the one where you bought the house that the other people had already made an offer. Well, I told you about what she did with this landlord. Well, this guy, the floor is yours.
He told me that it was evidently the sign must have still been in the yard. Anyway, I knocked on his door because this is where I wanted to be. This was in Dove Creek in Louisville. And so he said, well, it's already sold. I've had an offer on it. And I said, well, did you get your price? Well, no, first I asked him if I could see it. I said, may I see it just in case anything happens with your offer? So he let me go through the house and see it. So I decided, yeah, I like this, I want this. So I said, well, you say you've had an offer. Did you get your asking price or was this an offer? Well, it was an offer. And I said, well, I'll give you your asking price. And so forth. I don't remember everything I said, but I ended up with it. Whatever I said, I ended up with it. And this poor fellow that had made the offer, evidently this guy had not accepted it, but he had received it. So we got it, so. I think more than anything else, I'm grateful for my children. And Dad. I mean, that doesn't take anything away from him, but I'm grateful for my children. I feel extremely fortunate in every single one of them. I love them dearly, and I feel like they love us dearly. So that's the thing I'm most grateful for.
It's easy. Do what's right.
I would put staying close to your family and your friends, because as you get older, both of those things are more and more important to you. And of course, Dad's right. Do what's right and, do the best you can. But don't lose sight of the fact that you need to stay in touch with your family and your friends. Those are two huge things in my life. We haven't talked about it at all, and we don't go to church much now as we used to. But I found throughout our years of being married the two of us got along so much better when we went to church than when we didn't, because we'd have periods of time in moving and so forth and so on that we weren't as good about getting to church as other times. And we always got along with each other better when we went to church. I don't know why that is, but we did. And religion nowadays, it doesn't seem like young people pay much attention to that. I would say try to raise your family in church. They need the foundation. And they'll, even if they never go to church when they're older, they've got that foundation, and I think that's important. So, now, what else for a happy life? Communication. Oh, there's lots of things, but communication's important. Respect for each other is important. So many things. I'm going to let you take over.
I don't know what to add to that. There's one little thing that if you do have a disagreement with one of your loved ones and so forth, that you get over yourself as soon as you can and make it right. It doesn't make any difference if you say you're sorry and they don't, because they'll get it when you say you're sorry. So that seems to be hard for people to do, but it sure does work.
So that's communication again, I guess.
Yeah.
We'd have to stop and think. We don't do much of anything anymore except socialize. We have a lot of friends.
We have a lot of parties. We do have a lot of friends. Jeanne is one friendly fella, and she has a memory of an elephant. So when she sees people, she remembers all about their children, and they got their tooth pulled when they were 8, and all that stuff. And we have lots of couples and friends. And they're good people. So.
I had planned a big party for his 50th birthday, and as a surprise, for him, we contracted with this belly dancer to come in and entertain him. So that was fun because it was a surprise to him. Actually, it embarrassed him because, of course, she got right in front of him, you know, with all the gyrations and everything, but that was fun, and everybody enjoyed it, except maybe him. I don't know.
I knew where to look, but I wasn't supposed to.
I think I have a picture or two in my pictures, and she's right here, and he's looking down at the floor. You know? So, yeah, that was fun. Well, I'm most proud of my children. I keep going back to that, but I am. I'm proud of every single one of them. As far as personally, I'm proud of where we started and where we've ended. We were very poor when we were first married.
Yeah, we had money in a jar.
And he has worked day and night and very hard, and went from a bartender to a vice president of a big company. We have no worries today because he has provided for us and for our future. So we've come from being very, very poor to being pretty well off, really.
We're not as rich as David, but pretty rich.
But I am most proud of how our children have turned out. It's not easy to raise 5, and for all 5 of them to be good citizens and all that it entails. They're just wonderful. So that's my big accomplishment in life.